This is an experience of the void.
This is Occupy the Void. We have a very special guest, of one of the not only the most iconic voices in hip hop, but in music, and that's true. Be Real of Cypress Hill.
Thank
Well,
you.
yes. So this show is all about mental health. How is your mental health right now as an artist? How are you feeling in this moment?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I practice meditation, constant activity in terms of, physical fitness and whatnot, and trying to be happy. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Um, Throughout our time in the music industry, you have your ups and downs. And as an artist, you know, you get tested throughout time, and through the stresses and the pressure of putting out records and whatnot, the expectation of those records and things like that. A lot of artists spiral in terms of depression and anxiety with
Mm.
that. And fortunately, my circle and my friends and the ones that we've been doing music with all this time, we're all able to talk with each other when we got like, certain issues and stuff like that. So it makes for a better environment and a better culture in our workplace and what we do. And
Totally.
so, I think meditation and talking to people
Yeah.
has helped me a lot.
Could you turn your phone sideways?
Yes, I could.
Thank you. I appreciate you. There we go. Now you're real. Now you're big. Yay, be real. Do you have a confidant? Like if you're having struggles, do you have someone you kind of go to? Like
Well,
so I call my homies my shadow counsel. So my therapist is my high priestess. She's never wrong. That bitch is 60 years old. She's seen it all. She's
right.
whereas the shadow counsel in general, you come to them. You're like, this is what's going down. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a good circle of friends that I've grown up with that are still, my boys that will be honest with me 1000%, even when they know I don't want to hear it, or if they think I might not want to hear it. And then there's my wife, she's the first one I talked to before my circle of people and whatnot. So, it's just about having, you know, different people that you can convey whatever it is you're feeling or thinking,
Mm.
whether it's your spouse or partner or a circle of friends that you consider family, or if you're using a therapist, which is highly suggested for a lot of people. I think that you know years back people were feeling like if they went to see a therapist that they were would be looked down upon or
Mm.
whatever, but that is the biggest uh bullshit ever. Those people help folks break through things, and self-realization, and bringing some sort of peace to your mind that, like, you can live a happy life and not be so down on yourself or be beat up by the situations that you go through in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Having people to talk to is key. When
totally.
you bottle it up, it at some point it all comes to a head, and it might not and the way that it comes out may not be conducive to your mental state or health or your relationships.
Well,
So
violence is a big part of that. Like, and I think I'd be curious, like you've been in a few quite, I don't know, like aggressive worlds. Like you grew up in gang life, you've lived in hip hop for a long time. There's a lot of aggression about it. Do you think people feel comfortable saying they're struggling in those, yeah, like in gang life? Were you allowed to say I'm having a tough time?
I mean, traditionally, no. I
Yeah.
mean, like you're expected to keep that shit to yourself and just soldier out and get over it, get through it. But that that doesn't work. And it just creates bigger problems,
Totally.
and I realized that later, because coming from that world and coming into music and whatnot, if I had a problem, I didn't know necessarily how to convey it to someone, and I would hold it in and let that problem fester, and then I'd have this anger built up inside of me, and I trying to figure out how do I get past this, or how do I get rid of this anger, or whatever it is. Depression was never a thing for me. It was more I was more of an angry person.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a common
and,
theme, yeah. As a
yeah, and I learned to snap out of that. I stopped allowing myself to beat myself up for things things that I did in the past, and like looking for things that might redeem those things and stuff like that, and stressing on that. I had to get through a lot of these things to be okay with myself. And
Yep.
it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy, especially depending how you were raised, how you grew up, where you grew up, and all those circumstances, because
Yeah.
when you have any sort of issues and you want to talk about them to somebody, people try to make you look weak, and it's not weak. It's just something you have to get off your chest, and in order to own it and then get past it.
And to be our best selves, like humanity, for humanity to develop, we've got to learn how to regulate our emotions. And that
Yeah,
goes flows
we're all
into
not
creativity.
perfect. You
Yeah,
know what I
no,
mean?
yeah, word. Yeah, and we're not perfect, but we try and I try and be the best version of yourself,
Yeah,
like
we strive to be the best versions of ourselves. Some of us, some of us are working toward it. Some of us need a lot of work, and
yeah.
some, unfortunately, will never get there because they don't they they don't want to look inside because they don't like what's in there.
That's a big thing, and people run away. People do a lot of running
Yeah,
away. And it's interesting. What do you think? You're kind of like one of the high priests of cannabis culture, right? What was
that's that's what they say.
you are high priest, let's be real. You're in the you're carved into there's some stained glass with Be Real in it. What
Right on.
how did your relationship start with weed? Like, because it has a very interesting mental health impact in that I think it can be really helpful for some people and challenging for others. And it requires a certain level of skill to stay the master and not let this bitch take you over. Like you got to keep her in check. She's a powerful force, if you will.
Yeah, for me, it was like a casual thing at first.
Mhm.
It wasn't based out of activism or advocacy. It was like, us being mischievous kids
Yep.
hanging out with older kids that, were slightly more advanced than we were.
Yeah.
And, one of them one day pulls out a bong, and the rest of us that like were younger in the circle, so sort of like followed suit, like, okay, yeah, let's try that. And it became a thing, but it wasn't like an everyday thing.
Mm.
um and this is, I mean, when I'm a very young teenager, and I didn't start smoke like, and it was just very brief, and then I moved away from that area and away from those friends, and I didn't smoke until I didn't smoke again until I met up with Sen Dog and his brother Mello,
Yeah, right.
who were weed smokers, and
Mm.
sort of and initiated initiated me into their circle, and
Into the ritual.
reintroduced me to weed.
Yeah.
And it was just something that was casual, and then we started reading High Times, and reading about the freedom fighters, and the activism that was going on in the name of cannabis, and then we got a little bit more interested in that side of it.
Yeah.
So at first it was just something casually we did, and then it turned into, hey, this is, we believe in this, and
Yeah.
somehow it made its way into our music, but that was never really a plan. It was just something that
Yeah.
happened. And
Organically, like happening in your inner world, something that mattered to you, sort of thing.
yeah, I wrote a song, "Stoned is the Way of the Walk,"
Yep.
and it started from there. you
Yeah,
know
that was the beginning.
it wasn't even a plan. I was I was heading to Muggs's apartment where we were making our demos in his makeshift studio at the time, and I lived in Gardena, so I had to take the bus from Gardena to Hollywood, and on that trip, I started, thinking of these lines that end up being the song "Stoned is the Way to Walk." So that was like the first song, and it was just like based off of just an idea that popped into my head while I was riding on the bus. It wasn't like Muggs said, "Hey, we need a weed song. Write about some weed." It didn't happen like that. But when he heard that, he was like, "Oh, okay, this is different." And and then he asked me, "Hey, if you come up with another one, let me know." And sure enough, I had another idea called "Light Another," and those were the two songs that were the first representations for us into the cannabis activism and advocacy for us as a group. Well, the records weren't even out yet, but that was like those were the first steps.
Yeah, that was like the genesis of being involved in the movement. What impact has it had on your creative process? And was it like
Not much?
Not much. It doesn't.
No.
Whatever. It's a thing. It's fun. It really is just a part of your life now, isn't it?
It is. It is
not
just
a cause. It's a part of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, because I looked at it. I looked at it a long time ago as a creative person. I said, well, look, if I'm leaning on smoking cannabis to be creative, what happens if there's no cannabis, or what happens if I quit? Am I still gonna be able to be creative? And for me, it's all about, you manifest what you say and think and what you want. And for myself, I knew that I did not ever want to just be leaning on something other than my own creativity. So there a lot of the songs, even some of the songs talking about getting high or whatever, I wasn't necessarily stoned when I wrote them. I got stoned after.
You business.
And at the time, the weed wasn't flowing as freely for us because we weren't, we didn't have any money. So whatever we get is what we got. But it turned into something later as these songs would come out and people heard them and they're like, wow, these dudes are championing the weed. I mean, it's like they're talking about this shit like nothing. And that was just something that we did. And it in terms of all aspects of it, it's not like we need to get high to be creative. We don't need to get high to do a show. We don't need to get high for any of this to happen. This is just something that's a part of our culture, but we don't need it to do the job that we love so much. Writing music, you should be able to write music whether you're, stoned or not. At least that's, my take on it.
What has been some of the most mystical song births in your life?
Say that again?
Like mystical song births, like idea to reality. Like it's been like this kind of like sacred moment in the history of time. And like maybe like Black Sunday, what were some moments that really stuck with you? The line between yourself and the art was strong.
That's a good question. But for me, I mean, I think the song that brought it all together for us was We Ain't Going Out Like That. We took like a lot of mushrooms before we did that song, and we recorded it totally totally fucking melting. And it ended up making the album, but that was like our vibe, that we were out of the box like that we would do shit that no one else does and to create our vibe. And so that was pretty much the moment. And when we heard it back after being shroomed out of our minds, we loved what we did and we knew we had something special. Now the gamble is when you put it out, does everybody else think it's special? Unfortunately it was.
Unfortunately, 100%. What do mushrooms do for you?
Like put me in a good mood.
You're a psilocybin devotee.
We used to do them a lot back in the early 90s and early 2000s and stuff like that. Now, microdose here and there, but not as frequent as we used to.
Have you always been driven? I know when you were a kid, well, the last time we spoke, you said you wanted to be a pilot or a journalist and then became became a musical icon. Have you always been driven? Like, do you remember the first musical dream that kind of formed, or did that only happen after you turned poems into raps and then took those
You
next
know, I
steps?
think my first musical dream that formed was being a drummer. I
Really?
wanted to be a drummer. I wanted to, like, do the drum lessons and all that shit. But my father wanted me to be a truck driver, so he would not pay for drum lessons. Um, Oddly enough, I learned how to, sort of play later,
Yeah.
and I learned how to play percussions through Eric Bobo,
Yeah.
giving me some lessons and stuff like that. So,
Well, you jump on
that was the
beats.
first dream.
You
Say
jump
what?
on beats. You jump on beats. You just don't have to make them. You jump all over them, you know.
Oh yeah.
You're
I mean, I
home.
mean, I
Yeah.
make beats too.
Yeah.
That's
Of course.
like
Yeah.
I would chop up. There was a few years back for the Rise Up album anyway, for the
Yep.
Cypress Hill Rise Up album. I did like 3 mixtapes, and then I did a mixtape for my man Demrick, and I produced a lot of stuff in that time leading up to the Rise Up album, which I produced like a few songs there. So yeah, I was chopping up beats and all that stuff, which came from the percussion lane.
Yeah,
Learning
totally.
how to drum basic beats, and then learning how to play percussion and stuff like that. It sort of made making beats sort of easier for me.
Mm.
um but yeah, that was the first dream, being a drummer.
It was physical. It's physical music. Cypress Hill is
Yeah.
physical music. Like, and I think it's because it's got that beat driven element to it, you know? What
Yeah.
what's your relation? Okay. You've said most artists live in the struggle. That's often when they write their best songs. Do you are you finding struggle? Are you struggling? You're kind of an icon now. Are you struggling? Like, is it hard to find art? Like, can you
No.
struggle while being an icon? Obviously, a lot of people.
Yeah,
Yeah. What's the
definitely,
deal?
definitely you can,
Yeah.
especially some of us that are consi- you know legacy artists, I should say,
Mm.
or however they label us. When we started on major labels, we had all these resources and stuff, and the struggle was to figure out how you sell records with all these resources, and
Mm.
being accountable and responsible, and showing up to everything so that it all connects the dots in terms of trying to push you and your music. And when you go in the independent route, if you've been fortunate enough to build a base that follows you no matter where you land in terms of record labels, if you're on a major label, or you're an independent label,
Yep.
um, you know, you had all these resources, and now you don't when you're independent. So you just sort of have to be a little bit more creative in terms of how you're putting out these records, and how you're marketing and promoting the records
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And it's not always easy. Sometimes it's an uphill battle, because again, the major label resources are pretty vast. So if you want to get it on the radio, they're
Yeah.
going to have you go on a promo tour and talk to all the DJs, radio DJs, the programming directors, and all that stuff. When you're an independent artist, you don't have that. You're basically dealing on the strength of your relationships that maybe you built during the course of being on a major label.
Yep.
So it's now you have to just be more hands-on, and there is a struggle in that. But if you have your formula down and you have a good staff and good team, you could make a good run of it.
Yeah.
In terms of me, my struggle in the business these days is listening to some of these bullshit ass songs that are out there.
It's so boring, dude. It's so boring. Like, and I was listening to the Be Real TV episode. You guys were talking about like the monoculture. Like, you can't tell these songs apart. Like, you can't
Yeah.
tell the beats apart. You can't tell the voices apart. Whereas, your voice. I mean, there was nothing like it. There still isn't. That's kind of wild.
Well, there's less distinction now in terms of groups and artists having a sound that you could, like, pinpoint, say, oh, so that's so and so.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Or the production is by this guy, whatever. Like, people were that distinct where you could call it out.
Yeah.
And now, you know, it's cookie cutter. So that doesn't exist anymore. But it is what it is. There's still gems out there. You just have to go
Totally.
find them. Yeah, you know, it's like crate digging. If you're a producer and you're looking for a great sample, they're still out there. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody has used shit like, you know, 100 times and over, but there's so many records out there that no one's touched, or, you know, they took different parts of it and all that stuff. And it's just about you searching for that and peeling them out. And it's the same thing with artists. There's very dope groups and artists out there. It's just they're not getting shine from the radio station because they don't know how to put the light on them.
No.
And so those artists exist on playlists.
Yeah.
Or you might have to, you know, you might have to just find it yourself.
And you put the light on them. You know, you use your own light.
We try.
Them and
we try. You know, we got a lot of great DJs here. And they play all sorts of different music, open, because we're open format with our mix show. So
yeah,
you know, you hear a lot of great new artists from different genres and whatnot.
Well, it's important. Now, this is a mental health show. We have to talk about Insane in the Brain just briefly, because it is well, is it a song about? It's not a song about mental health. It kind of is. No. It's not at all. It's a diss track. But what
it is a diss.
What is the funniest thing people have come up to you about that? Because like I spoke to Serge Tankian of System of the Down, and you know that song "Wake Up." People are always running up to him in public and yelling "Wake Up" behind him, which is pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll either come up to me and sing "Insane in the Membrane," or they'll you know, quote the beginning line. Don't you know I'm loco? You know,
that's the thing. Well, this is what happens when you make iconic songs. You know,
this is what happens. I don't mind it. I just laugh at
hilarious.
It. You know?
Yeah, well, it's kind of built a thing. What are you writing now? Like, what does the future hold for Cypress Hill? Are you guys going to write a new record? Or
we're going to put out some songs next year. I don't know about albums, but we're definitely going to be putting out new songs.
Yeah.
And but before that, I have an album coming out with Psycho Les next month called Real Psycho, and then following that, I have an album with Exhibit and our partner Demrick, and the album the group name is Serial Killers, and you know, that's coming out in I believe October. Then after that, Cypress Music will follow. You know,
that's
early
huge,
next
bro. That's huge. You're doing big stuff.
Trying to keep busy.
Do you write every day?
I don't write every day.
How do you find?
But if I get it, if I get an idea, I'll write it, even if I don't have the beat. But you know, I'm usually waiting for, you know, the right music or whatever to vibe to. But if I got a good idea, then I'll write it before I get the beat.
Yeah.
And then the key there is to try to find the beat that complements that particular song.
Yeah.
So, you know, that happened with Rock Superstar. I had that idea for about 3-4 years until Muggs had the right music that I thought it could, you know, could live on. Hey, I got to start my Dr. Green Thumb show now.
Yeah. Oh, you got to start. Oh, this is pretty cool. Thank you.
This is an experience of the void.